Welcome to Sloppy Spoilers with your host, DT2. What's up, y'all? DT2 Comic Chat here, and we are here again for another episode of Sloppy Spoilers. Do you know why we call this show Sloppy Spoilers? It's because we take a deep dive. We don't just tell you what happened in the episode. We take a deep dive into everything that's going on. See what I mean? And sometimes that gets kind of messy, hence the term Sloppy Spoilers. On this episode, we're going to be talking about MoonKnight, Episode 2, Summon the Suit. A lot of things happen in this episode, so let me get my co-host on. Welcome to David Nemesis Howard. What's up, Nims?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This show is really starting to take off. It's got a lot of promise. I'm really excited to talk about this episode. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Welcome to Steve, Shade Wing Sellers. What's up, Steve?
Men on this review, top men. This show is really getting crazy and really interesting, and it feels in some ways like the kind of thing that Netflix might have done a few years ago. There are still definite Disney elements to this episode still, but at least you gotta get the sense that there's real depth that they're aiming towards, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes.
I know exactly what you're talking about. We're going to talk about that when it comes up in the episode. Welcome to Jeff, Dr. Fate Bracey.
Good evening out there, everyone. And this is some exciting stuff. Just as the moon goes through many phases, we see that the Moon Knight himself goes through phases. Different Moon Knights for different occasions, if you will. And it fits right in with the fact that Mark Spector has many phases to his own personality or multiple personalities. Looking forward to diving into this.
Now that is a good segue. That's what we're going to start out talking about. I'd like Steve to start talking about DID. The show straddles the line between, is this in my head? Is this real, happening in a 3D world? Or is it happening in a spiritual plane? Because those are three different dimensions. So Stephen is asking, am I delusional? Is this happening in my head? Is this happening out here in the physical world and only I can see it, which is different from an illusion, okay? Or is it on a spiritual plane? Are there beings that only exist in the invisible world that are somehow impacting the natural world? And this show, in this episode in particular, weaves all of that together so seamlessly until it, for a few minutes, is going to make you think that you're crazy. But anyway, Steve, talk to us about DID. What does this show do? A good representation? I know we talked about it last time, but it bears repeating here. Does it do a good representation, you think, of what that would look like?
I think it does a reasonable job. Now, Moon Knight is not the first character with DID in the Marvel universe that that has struggled with this disorder. The Hulk in the comics is traditionally also a DID sort of situation. Originally, like in that case, it wasn't really that well done, but eventually as it became more understood and you started getting writers that really paid more attention to it, it gradually got better. I feel that with Moon Knight, there's a somewhat similar process where, because the whole process of how the character developed the DID angle, it wasn't really originally supposed to be that he had it. Mm-hmm. Because the idea is that Mark Spector was this mercenary and he developed these other identities, as part of his spy routine, where he would take on these personas and just, pretend to be these people. And then gradually it became retconned. I think it was under Warren Ellis that it actually was a DID situation. And then gradually other writers started, making more sense out of that. And so what you're seeing in the show is them dealing with a lot of those elements and trying to make it all fit. I don't think it's perfect. I think it is reasonable enough for the show that they're telling, for the story that they're telling. And I am okay with it as a whole. Now, it's not the way I would necessarily do it, because I really kind of look at Stephen Grant as somebody who is in denial of Mark Spector, because Mark has guilt issues over the horrible things that he did as a mercenary. And so I really kind of tend to see that personality as, I am denying that part of myself that did these horrible things. I think that the way that they're going to do it is probably going to be different. That's okay. If it makes sense for the story that they're telling. I haven't gone far enough to know like all the ins and outs of it. But I would say that right at this point that I have seen it, it is reasonable enough where at least I find the characters overall sympathetic. I love the Mark personality. And so I'm really, really kind of interested to see where they go with this. But yeah, it's about as decent as you would expect of a show of this kind, while maintaining a dramatic flair to it.
So your answer is basically that it's serviceable. It serves what it's trying to do. Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's expert.
Briefly, Bracy and Nims, your thoughts on that same thing? Briefly, because we're going to move on.
You want to go, Jeff? You want me to go?
Oh, doesn't matter.
Well, I'll just put my 2 cents in and then let Jeff follow up because he has worked in mental health. I found that this was, especially when watching ahead a little bit, but even in this episode, I think it's a very extreme case of DID. Usually it doesn't manifest like that. I have a little bit of experience with this, and I won't talk about how or who, but usually it's much more subtle than that. And even times the personalities are so similar, you can't really tell the difference unless you're really a professional. However, this is a comic book for one. So they're telling a story. That's number one. And number two, there are cases where it is this extreme. It may not be this dramatic, this much flair to it, but there are cases where there are whole personalities that are not aware of each other and everything else. So they're very rare, but to me, like I like Steve said, I think it's serviceable. I think it's a little dramatized because, well, you're in the habit of telling stories, and sometimes you have to blow things out of proportion to tell your story, and it's superhero stories, so that kind of makes sense.
Bracy.
Now I've got to agree with Nemesis. He's right on the money. What we're seeing here is the most extreme case, and even then it's fictionalized, of course, for the point of the narrative. In most cases, when somebody has DID, like you said, the personalities, the host, if you will, is aware of them, and in general they tend to work together because they all have to share the same corpus. When you think of like extreme cases, you want to look at something like James McAvoy's brilliant portrayal in Split and Glass, or I believe it was Sally Fields maybe way back in the day in Sybil. Yeah. The actual case of somebody who had upwards of 100 separate personalities, and her mind was such a mess she didn't know what was going on from personality to personality. And again, that's an example of the most rare and extreme cases. So for this setting, this is a lot of fun. This is interesting. It is it's highly improbable, but not out of the realm of possibility, and very fictionalized. It's the relationship we see here is very similar to a show that I don't remember the name of it. Christian Slater did a TV show about a guy who was a spy, and he was programmed to be a normal dude when he was quote unquote off duty. And you see the same sort of relationship here, where one guy is just Joe Average and the other guy is a total ruthless killer, and watching them trying to figure out how to live a life together. So I'm getting shades of that. And like I said, I can't remember, but look up Christian Slater, watch the show, even though it was sadly canceled early. It's very worth it.
Or to bring an example that has nothing to do with any of this, but kind of fits, Yu-Gi-Oh! So
See, that's why I wanted to bring this up, because mental health issues are real, and they definitely need to be taken seriously. And so when we see them in the context of a fictionalized account, we need to know what's more on point, what's more real world, or what's not. What I find fascinating, like I said in the intro, is that this episode starts out right after the last one. But what Stephen is trying to find out is what happened. Did it happen? What did I experience? To me, and also I'm glad you brought up Bruce Banner, because I also thought about Hank Pym in terms of, different personalities or that kind of thing. But what if you're a Joan of Arc figure and you're getting messages from a spiritual source, but can't nobody hear it but you. The world is going to perceive you as crazy.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, you don't have any rest or peace yourself.
They would call you schizophrenic. So
because you're perceiving something on a spiritual plane. And so to me, what is brilliant about the opening is when he goes to his friend, which reminds me a lot of what's his name from Mission Impossible. He was Scotty in New Trek.
Oh, Yeltsin?
No.
Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg. That guy reminds us of Simon Pegg character. So he goes into the control room because they're going to look at the footage from the night before. And so he keeps waiting for the jackal or the wolf that was chasing him to show up on the footage, but it doesn't. And he keeps waiting for the things he experienced to be caught on tape, but they weren't. So he's running into the artifacts, and he was like, "You messed up the news," and he did all that stuff in the bathroom or whatever. So we see what was happening, but in the natural world, there's no record of anything but Stephen apparently having a freak out, which I thought was brilliant. Because is it in his mind? Is it in the physical world? But it's invisible, like a Sue Storm kind of thing, or like The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss's movie, where it was happening, but didn't nobody believe it because you couldn't see him. He was there, you just couldn't see him. Or is it a spiritual force? Those are three different things. And the brilliance of the way the episode in this series makes you have to question it, at least at this point, episode 2, makes you have to question it to make you get hungry for answers. Because later on in the episode, something happens as a bookend to what I'm talking about now, where it's actually something spiritual that is then physical but invisible, that then affects the world around them, and everybody sees it, which I thought was just like a bookend to how it starts. Mm-hmm. So how it starts is, Stephen's trying to figure out what is going on with me, as anybody would do. I'm gonna talk a little bit later about his reaction to that because it got on my nerves, but I'll get there. I don't want to jump the gun. So he's trying to figure that out, and he goes and he does, what all spies do. Jason Bourne did it. Everybody does it. You got a locker somewhere with all your stash. So he goes somewhere to get the red bag in the Bourne identity, that MacGuffin, and he's leafing through everything, and he sees money, he sees weapons, and he sees the scarab. And he goes, okay, I'm not crazy, it's real, that kind of thing, and kind of freaks out about it because it means a whole bunch of different things. Because now when you're at the point as when you're realizing, okay, it's not just all in my mind, I still need answers for everything else that's going on, and what else am I going to do? So in this episode, we meet 3 main characters. We meet Layla, we meet Khonshu, and we meet the real MoonKnight. We saw him at the end of the last episode, but we see him show up for real in this one. So let's start with meeting Khonshu because it happened when he was going in a security box to get it back. Now, Khonshu is definitely supposed to be a jerk type of demigod character. He has to be, a blockhead and that kind of thing. Because I've watched ahead, and so as I rewatch this, I'm saying to myself, did he really need to manifest to Stephen like that? Because who wouldn't be scared out of their gourd? Okay, so I'm seeing, we're looking at the scene with the locker, and the lights are flashing, and the lights are going on and off, and they're moving towards him, and then Khonshu appears in between the flashes, and he's got the big bird head and everything, and it's one of those things where you don't feel like you're getting away, and he's 8 feet tall. And I'm like, what did you expect Stephen to do? How did you expect him to respond? How would anybody respond to that? And then he says, give it back, fool. That one had me cracking up. I'm like, okay, all right. So I see what kind of dude you are. So I want to hear your thoughts about the introduction of Khonshu. Like I said, the way I'm seeing it, he looks malevolent. He looks like he has ill intent. When he talks, we find out he's a jerk. And I still don't know how I expected Stephen to respond. because most people would do exactly what Stephen did, but I thought that was really something. And so I want to hear what you think about that, because who Khonshu is, and I don't just mean his identity, I mean his manner, who he is and how he deals is at the heart of everything that happens in this show. So this is the first time we get a good look at him, and we get to hear what he's like and call Stephen a fool. Okay, so what do you think about that, Nims?
Yeah, I think Khonshu is great in the comics, and I think he's great here as well, because Khonshu, for all that he, has given Stephen and Mark, MoonKnight powers, he's not, well, he's most definitely not the protagonist, but he's not a hero either. He's not a heroic figure. He's an antagonist. He is, I wouldn't say he's a bad guy, but he's definitely not a good guy. He's in it for himself. Later episodes, we're going to find out more about his motivation, which doesn't do a lot to endear us to him, really. I think he's kind of a petulant child who misses his old status,
Mm-hmm. That's a good description.
Yeah, and there are some things that we've left, we still haven't found out about exactly what is going on, and maybe he's doing some good stuff or whatever, but I think Khonshu misses the good old days where he could show up and scare the hell out of some fishermen in his hut on the Nile, and boss some people around and do some stuff like that, and so, and he doesn't have a whole lot of use for people he doesn't find useful, and so that's what he is. He's a user. He uses people. And he doesn't have a whole lot of use for Stephen. He thinks Stephen's a weakling, and he wants to get rid of him because the person who's useful to him is Mark. And so I just find this incredibly fascinating. And the character of Khonshu, like you said, I think it's a perfectly accurate description. Let's just call it, he's an a-hole. He really is. So whether he's good or not, he's still an a-hole. So and that really kind of fits in, with what happened in the comics, and even I have this game. It's a pinball game, and one of the pinball boards that you could do is a MoonKnight board, and Khonshu will pop up in the middle of you playing pinball and just berate you while you're doing something. So it just fits it perfectly. You'd be like, "Yeah, oh, this is a great shot, stupid," or something like that. So it just fits in perfectly.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah.
One thing I want to mention before I throw it to Bracy, and that is that something I really, really, really liked about this opening was that there were actual consequences to the damage done in the museum.
Mm-hmm.
He loses his job. I really like that, because when we don't see stuff like that, and I know a lot of people think that we're nitpicky or over detailed, but we're writers, that's kind of what we do. It's little scenes like that that give it enough gravity and enough real world feel to keep you emotionally engaged. Otherwise, it becomes a Scooby-Doo cartoon.
Yeah.
All that damage to all that expensive stuff and nothing happened doesn't make any sense.
One thing I did want to add real quick, and this is definitely going to come in episodes 4 and 5, but in our last episode, I talked a little bit about Richard Riordan and his Kane Chronicles, and that's all about Egyptian gods and everything. I think they borrowed a lot. Didn't steal, they just borrowed some ideas from those books for this, because Disney owns the rights to those books as well.
Huh.
And one of the things that's really cool is that the way Riordan explains people not being able to see the gods and everything, even though they see the physical manifestations of what happens. So like a huge monster can run down in cars and everything, but he has something in Percy Jackson, and Kane Chronicles ties into Percy Jackson, called the Mist, where normal humans can't comprehend.
Yeah, you get in the Dresden Files too. Humans don't want to know about the supernatural.
So they
They
rationalize
just don't see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they end up rationalizing everything away, and it's just an interesting concept. So,
okay, but my question is, the jackal, the hound that was chasing him, was actually hanging off the ceiling and springing off the walls and hitting things. That means there should be some type of forensic evidence of the impact, even if you can't see the creature. And the way it looked on the security tape is that Stephen was imagining the whole thing.
Yeah,
So
that was definitely strange. So.
Yeah, so he gets killed.
Although there is one possible explanation, and that is that maybe Harrow used his connections with whoever's running the museum to stage a massive cover-up, because we know that he's got people on the inside working for him.
Yeah.
That's
And
interesting.
the fight between Moon Knight and the Jackal, that definitely stayed. So you had all the physical destruction in the bathroom. So
Right. That's what I'm saying. Okay, Bracy, what do you think about the introduction of Khonshu?
Now, just to answer your question, I take it that there are supernatural beings that can manifest in the real world, even if they are hidden in some way. I mean, because we see Khonshu all over the place. We see that he can affect the world. You know, he creates wind, he flickers the lights. The Jackal's obviously causing physical damage. But then what do we see when they're defeated? They crumble away into sand, and then even the sand dissipates. So it's kind of like a ghost manifesting a physical form, but it's ectoplasm. And then when that energy isn't there to hold the ectoplasm into a physical form, it just dissipates and goes back into the aether. That's my take on things. Now, as for Khonshu, oh boy, do I love this. Because one of the things I love about this series that makes it so different from every other piece of MCU property is it still comes across as a horror movie and kind of a spy thriller at the same time. And the horror elements are so there, so very much there. I couldn't help but think this successfully does what the New Mutants movie wanted to do. It just succeeds in spades. It really has all the aesthetics of the horror, and it's not afraid to go there, even in a PG-13 context. The New Mutants movie tried to rein itself in, and if they're going to have such dark themes, they pulled back too much. Unfortunately, you got to go for it, or just not at all. So I love the manifestation of Khonshu. Khonshu in this world is a big jerk, and so he thinks nothing of terrifying mortals, obviously. And so even though Steven's reaction is going to be typical, what you would expect, this is just who Khonshu is. He's a god. You're immortal. Get over it. He's got that Loki complex, like you'll never be a god, that sort of thing. Now, what I find interesting about this is the Khonshu we're seeing is something of a retcon. He does exist in comics, but he's only existed in comics in, say, like the last 6 years or so. This show takes a lot from a series that was done where Mark Spector was in an asylum, and we had that unreliability of the story. There were planes of reality that we're dealing with, and this is where we first see Khonshu with the Falcon's skull head. We find out that Mark is actually surrounded by gods, and you don't know if they're real gods or if he's just insane. So I love how the show is playing up on this angle. For those of you who are aware, Khonshu in the comics, for the majority of his existence, the Marvel Universe, actually looks exactly like the Moon Knight outfit that Mark Spector wears. He's got the blank face, the hood, the cloak. He's got the Egyptian loincloth, and he's normally holding his staff. All that. Yeah. The only thing he lacked was the cape. He didn't always wear the cape. Sometimes he'd wear the cape, but that's what he used to look like, and he used to be far more benevolent. But just like with the DID, the retcon of Khonshu works terrifically if you're going to dive deeply into the disturbing idea of multiple personalities, fractured personality. I love the fact that Steven is the complete antithesis of Mark Spector, because that shows his guilt pushed him so far in the opposition that he created this sad little nerd of a guy, the antithesis of a bloodthirsty mercenary. And like we said, like Khonshu hates this guy because, as Nem rightly pointed out, he is not useful at all. And Khonshu is menacing. Now, he serves a cosmic purpose in the punishing of the villainous, and it's a righteous purpose to have. But he is more than willing to be a user, and he threatens Mark outright. If you fall away, there's always your wife. She would make a terrific agent. Why do you think I try to keep the two of you so close together? So yeah, he's not a protagonist. He's right there. He is an antagonist who's kind of sort of doing the right thing, but he's a few steps beyond where even the Punisher is in terms of that, because the Punisher won't use innocence. But then again, once again, Khonshu lives in his own ivory tower, if you will, because he is a celestial being, and he's looking at the world and going like, man, you mortals screw it up, as we'll find out in later episodes. particularly the next episode, he argues the point like that they need us. Like, yeah, we all agreed to back off and leave humanity alone, but like, look, they need us because they're complete screw ups without us. So that's where he's coming from. And there is the fact that he does have that wannabe attitude. It's like, I used to have a place of grandeur and glory. Now I'm stuck basically existing as a wraith, and that's just not good enough. So I love the introduction of Khonshu. I loved all the horror tropes. Oscar Isaacs played his reaction to it brilliantly. And as soon as like they were walking through the corridors of the storage building, and all the sodium lights are coming on with the big boom 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 noise, I was like, that's going to reverse the other way, and I'm still looking forward to that because that's like one of my favorite horror tropes is when the lights just start going off in concession, especially you have the big crazy noise to go with it. So they did not disappoint. They gave me what I wanted.
Last time I said that Khonshu was the Judd Nelson of gods, so this time I'm going to say he's the Bender of gods. Okay, he goes even deeper. He's Bender now. Okay, Steve, what did you think about the introduction of Khonshu?
Yeah, I think you guys have covered a lot of the details pretty well. One point I'm going to add about Khonshu himself is that in the Jeff Lemire run, one of the things that they point out is that Khonshu is considered the asshole of the gods. He's actually called this. The other gods cannot stand him. Even the gods hate him. So this ought to tell you like what kind of character that Mark has gotten himself mixed up in. This is a guy who is like very Old Testament, very much of the wrath of God, and making you fear me, and have at you mortals, you are my playthings. And there's also the Lovecraftian aspect, which you start seeing as well in the scene, which is just the feeling that these gods are bigger than you. They don't care about you, and you are just kind of like their plaything, and you're in the middle of this situation that you can't get out of. And if they pay attention to you, it may actually be worse than if they don't ignore you completely. And when you're the favorite of those gods, your life is pretty much all screwed up. One thing I really did kind of like about that whole set, with the storage locker, is I was reminded a lot of the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark with the storage room. And the part of the reason for that is, it does really lend itself to darkness and to horror, but it also lends into the other aspects of the story that really works, which is, not just the psychological horror, but also the angle that this is a spot that, you're dealing with a character as a spy, and also with the Egyptology and the Indiana Jones style adventure. So all of these come together in this one set, and it is really, really well done. And I love how, Stephen Grant is absolutely, out of his mind and out of his wits because he cannot deal with these things, and he doesn't know how much of what he's seeing is real or not. No. Now, Stephen Grant, I think, kind of deserves to be called an idiot to a certain extent, because, certainly it's like, okay, if that the people, working in the museum, you have at least some of them working for Harrow. Why are you asking them for help? I just, that kind of thing just kind of irritated me. So it's like, okay, yeah, why are you trying to turn to all these people and trust all these people when you really can't trust anybody? You can't even trust Khonshu. And it seems like the only person that he ends up turning in to later is Layla, but getting to that. But I like the way that Grant kind of looks into all these things. He finds the trail to the storage locker. He finds out more about Mark. Oh, okay, yeah, this is his name. I like that the guy that runs the place actually recognized his face. Oh, it's like, oh yeah, you're the guy who goes into this locker. I never forget a face. Little details like this that kind of show, okay, yeah, maybe I'm not completely crazy. Maybe there's some elements of this that are more real. But how much of what is true and how much of it is like me imagining it, and how much of it is, Khonshu showing me things? Is what Khonshu is showing me true? Or is he just messing with me? And because Khonshu is such an unreliable character himself, you never know how much of it is. Maybe what you're seeing is real. Maybe what you're seeing is Khonshu messing with you. Maybe what you're seeing is like a complete delusion. because you're messed up and you're, and you have DID. Who knows? And that's what I really actually have kind of liked about this show, is the way that they play up the psychological horror and the unreliable narrator to the point where you cannot trust anything or anyone, and that is truly scary. Because if you can't trust anybody outside you to turn to, you are truly alone. And I just love the isolation, the solitude, and the claustrophobia of this scene, which really hits a lot of these points. It's very, very well done.
Yeah, there's a medical term for that, which is a solipsism. When you can't trust the fact that you're the
is real, and you suspect
as far as you know,
Yep.
you're the only real thing in existence. And what a terrifying way to lead your life.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I want to throw out next is the next character that we meet that's significant is Layla. And he meets Layla as he's fleeing from the storage locker, as he's fleeing from Khonshu, Khonshu's like, give it back, fool. Like, I'm out. So he's running out, and then he falls, which was really convenient that he just happens to fall. But we'll cut him some slack. We'll let them have that one, because there's all kinds of Scooby-Doo stuff, and like Steve said, all kinds of Disney stuff still happening. But I know what he's talking about. But anyway, so conveniently, he just happens to fall at the feet of, here's his, as we find out, his ex or soon-to-be ex, or we're not together, but we're still legally married. Let's do this divorce thing. Happens to run into her. And I knew as soon as she seemed repulsed by him that she was going to fall in love with him. And I knew there was going to be, I was like, because y'all remember I wrote it in the thing. I was like, I smell a triangle.
Yep.
So as soon, she's like, would you stop touching me? Would you stop grabbing onto me? He's like, where am I supposed to grab? We're on a bike, that kind of thing. And, would you, I'm like, oh, okay. I'll see where this is going. So we meet Layla, and I really like her. But the reason that I like her is because she feels so real. Feels like if you were, because, okay. As everybody knows, an actor's tool is their face and their body. So they have to convey what the character is feeling. And if there's no dialogue, and sometimes the best scenes don't have dialogue, then they have to convey to you what the character is feeling. And that's the job of acting. If it's something you've never done, it's one of those things that maybe people think, is easy, but just try it. Just try it if you think that's easy. So what happens with Layla is different when you break up with somebody, but not because you stop loving them. That's different. And she clearly still has feelings for Mark, but she conveyed that so well to me. She didn't believe anything Stephen had to say. She didn't like the way she told him to drop the act because you're not Mark. And Stephen was like, no, this is really me. I don't know what you're talking about. And also the incredible use of reflective surfaces. So Steve and Mark can have their conversation is brilliant. Brilliant. And so they're having their conversations that Layla's not privy to. So so we see both sides of the coin. And so it's clear from her presence that she still very much has feelings for Mark. And then she says, once they get back to the apartment, that, you sent me these papers, but you didn't sign them, divorce papers, and, are we going to do this or what? And Stephen's like, I would never divorce you. And then they had that moment. I was like, oh, Lord, I told you. But so she feels so real to me as a kid, like someone that was in that situation who's trying to get with their ex to try to get some business done, and it looked like they're playing crazy. You would have no patience for that. But also, if they wanted a divorce and you didn't, but you're going through with it because you can't make somebody stay married to you. She conveyed all that with her face, with her body language, with her tone. I thought that was great. And that's why I like her, because she feels so real. If you actually dropped a real person in this situation, I believe they would act like Layla. That's how real I thought she was as a character. And, she's got some fight to her. Both in her personality, and she's got some skill. And once, however, she sees the scarab, she reveals that they got that together. So now you see that their partnership wasn't just a marriage, they were actually what's Indiana Jones's girlfriend? Is it Karen?
Yep.
Marion.
Karen, yeah.
Marion. Karen is
Marion.
an actor that plays her. Marion. Yeah. So it's like an Indian Marion situation. We're out there, we're in the sand, we're digging, we're chasing the artifacts. This was me and you. Now you're trying to convince me you're some other dude that looks and smells like my husband, but you're some other guy. Okay. And you got the thing we sold together. Okay, dude, really? And she just conveys all that so well. I just thought it was great. And the last thing I'll say before I throw it out is the measuring stick for me is always, do I want to see more of them together? I promise you, there's some couples that I've seen on screen that I cringe. When I'm in the movies, I'm like, la, 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 is this over? Because I don't even want to hear you talk. When I'm at home, I just put it on mute, boop, or I fast forward because I don't want to see it. And there's definitely some couples that I feel like that because the beauty of the Layla character, and once again, I'm pointing all this out because a good, well-written, well-directed anything is like an ice skating performance. It's so smooth. It's so seamless. You don't notice all the mechanics that are going on while it's happening. In this particular performance, with the introduction of Layla and the chemistry and the way they're playing off of each other and me wanting to see more of them, it's because nothing slowed down when Layla shows up. That's how you know you have a well-written character and you cast it right and you directed it right. Because you can tell in other TV shows and movies when an actor that's wrong for the role or a terribly written character or director that don't know what to do with it. Like they got the job because they was hot. And that's their only defining characteristic. Here comes hot person. The action just slows down. And you're like, oh my goodness. And I never felt that once with her. That's why I like her. That's how I know she's such a great character. So let me hear you guys' thoughts about the introduction of Layla. Let's start with Steve.
Yeah, one thing I will point out is my favorite meme involving MoonKnight is basically the you versus the guy that she tells you not to worry about, and they are both Oscar Isaac. So that is this show in a nutshell with the triangle. I will say that I think she definitely is not over Mark, but at the same time, it's like it's that relationship with that person that you love, but who drives you nuts, and that is what her relationship with Mark is. You could definitely tell that they care about each other, but Mark has for whatever reason has taken it upon himself to cut her out of this business with Khonshu because he's worried about her, and he's doing it for what he thinks are the right reasons, but at the same time it's driving a wedge between them, and it's like he's trying to talk Stephen Grant into doing the same thing. It's like, you don't want to do this because this is going to kill her, etc. But, as we find out, she's more than capable of taking care of herself. Thank you very much. And it's not necessarily in a way that we've seen on other shows where they've overplayed it, where, she seems like a caricature or Mary Sue or anything of that nature. She definitely seems like a compliment to Mark and also to Stephen Grant in various other ways. Where she is, when he's Mark, she brings more of the Egyptology, more of the science and things like that to the table because Mark doesn't have that. And when she's Stephen Grant, she ends up being more of the action girl that he needs to support her. So in a way, she's a compliment to both of them, having like a little bit of each skill set and having like her own background. She is definitely the Marion to his Indy, but she's also Marlene Alron from the original MoonKnight comic. And they take little bits and pieces from Marlene, but she's not Marlene. Because Marlene's whole thing in the comics is that, she was always more interested in the Stephen Grant, the millionaire guy. She was like more interested in like being involved with him. And she had kind of like shall we say, a ambivalent relationship with Mark Spector. Just put it that way. She didn't like a lot of the stuff that he was doing as MoonKnight a lot of the time. So there's a little bit of that echoed, but it's in a different way. Where Marlene was more like the daughter of an archaeologist, they decide to make her full on an archaeologist. They make her from Egypt. All things that make her kind of like a more interesting character that fits into the story. But at the same time, she's her own character, and she has a lot of depth, and she works very well for the dynamics and the story that they're telling here. Whether that's being the character who cares about Mark and is trying to reach him, or whether or not like she's kind of pissed at him and kind of giving Stephen Grant like the information that he needs to know about Mark, while at the same time like looking at him thinking, who is this guy? What the hell is Mark doing, and why is he acting like a nebbishy British dude? The way that the confusion plays on her face, the way that the actress plays it. And I will say this actress is very good in this role. I like her a lot. I think that she gets the physicality of it well. I think that she manages to hold her own against Oscar Isaac in both roles. And that's not an easy thing to do. So she's asked to really do a lot as an actress, and the character is asked to do a lot, but she fits in all of those elements. And, seeing her, coping with the, clear breakdown, of Mark and Stephen Grant as they are arguing with each other over what to do, with the stuff in his flat. It's just, really, really great moments, and you can definitely tell that there are a lot of different conversations, both between those characters and with her. And they're both having different conversations with her at the same time. And that is really, really cleverly written stuff. It's very well acted stuff. And I really like this character. She's really has become, especially in later episodes, one of these characters that has really grown on me, even if she is basically a new version of a character that they adapted from the comics. Really, really well done.
Now, I thought what you said was really, really well said, that her character balances the elements of both sides of the Mark Steven kind of thing, and she can kind of supply what's needed based on kind of who's in control of the body. I thought that was great. I'm going to throw this out before I throw it to Bracy. Also, one of the things I like about this, I forgot to mention, is that it avoids one of my most hated superhero tropes, and that is that I took one look at you and fell in love with you. I can't stand that. I can't stand that. You can look at somebody and desire them. You can look at somebody and lust after them, but you cannot love that which you do not know. And I don't understand why they do that. I just met you. Now I'm willing to turn my whole life upside down for you. That's very TV melodramatic, larger than life stuff that they do with superheroes all the time. People, try to make the argument about how Clark isn't who he is because of Lois, because they kept writing those stories where something happens to Lois, Clark just suddenly changes personalities because she's the only thing that tethers his humanity, which is ridiculous. But, it was like once he met her, it's like he just had to have her, like when he met her, even in Superman the movie, but also in the comics. And I never quite got that. I'm like, you're out of all the dudes that have access to all the women in the world, you fall in love with the first woman that you meet. I can't put that together in my head. But anyway, the reason I like this is because they have history, and it's right there in front of you on the screen. They have a real history. She's a real character that was really a part of his life before all this happened. And I love that, because to introduce someone random, or to introduce someone that we haven't seen, or introduce someone and bring her in this crazy world would have been a much harder feat. This really, really works. But I don't like I just met you and I'm willing to give up my powers for you and I'm going to move across the country and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no. A little bit tired of that. Okay, Bracy, what'd you think about the introduction of Layla?
Well, on the point that you just made there, one thing that's going to make this love triangle work is the fact that even though Stephen is a completely different personality, he's still wearing Mark Spector's face. And even though Oscar does a brilliant job of portraying somebody with completely different affectations, body language, posture, all of this, I mean, it's the best job I've seen of this sort of thing since Christopher Reeves was Superman and Clark Kent. But, there is that familiarity, the fact that she is going to literally know every inch of his body because they were married. And that's going to lead some credence as well to it if Mark is the guy who drives her crazy, perhaps Steven is the guy who's going to fulfill her in different ways. Now, having had experience in the military and seeing people in this situation and the training I had, I like yourself. The love at first sight thing is a big trope. You see it all over stories from the origin of stories forward. But what's more factual and something you can buy into more, and is something that does work for superheroes, because I see it happen anytime you get men and women together in high stress situations, and superheroes are literally putting their lives on the line. What you see is people who develop an intense physical attraction or just a need, if you will, to blow off steam, and they do that physically with each other. Because if you're in these situations where you might die at any second, sometimes you just want to live a little, and so I can forgive people coming together very quickly in those sorts of situations. It feels real. And speaking of feeling real, one of the things I like about Layla here is everything she does feels organic. When you're making films, one of the things you want to shoot for is authenticity. You want to, like you were talking about earlier, you want it to feel like reality TV, like you're actually watching real people. So anytime I can see somebody who disappears into a character, like Heath Ledger making me forget that he's the Heath Ledger when he plays the Joker, or Jeremy Brett when he played Sherlock Holmes in the BBC, and any number of actors who have managed to do that. Recently we saw it with Colin Farrell doing the Penguin. I just lost the guy in there. Everything she does feels organic. Her response to Steven, her grudging acceptance of the divorce papers while I'm here, signing them, her starting to come on board with Steven and understand that he's just a terrified noob way out of his depth. Everything about that feels legit. And that all comes from the actress, and she's doing a really incredible job. It's not just the writer, because she's the one who has to portray it. And it's like you said, when you have to portray not using your voice, because your voice is a powerful instrument in the field of acting. But, it's even crazier to have to do everything just solely through expression. One of my favorite examples of this is the much maligned Christian Haydenson in the prequels. When Padme goes up and tells him she's pregnant, he has several seconds of all these emotions washing over his face. And that's when I appreciated what he could do as an actor, because he wasn't being saddled with George Lucas's direction, which was trying to minimalize it. It was trying to turn Anakin into Darth Vader at the time, bring down his emotions. He wanted to speak very monotone, all these sorts of things. And Christian argued he wanted to do more, but Lucas didn't want him to go there. But whenever he doesn't get to speak, you get to see the actor shine through. And that's what I felt like watching her in the apartment scene. Very, very good stuff. And as Steve pointed out, another thing I like about her is that she is not Mary Sue. She is competent. She is believably so, especially in the context of a superhero world. But she is far from perfect. She gets her butt kicked, even when she's kicking butt. She takes her lumps. There's times when she's completely out of her depth. She ends up attacking a supernatural monster later and gets hammered for it. But she's brave enough to do so because her husband, no matter who's riding the bicycle at the time, is still the one over there in the midst of this fight. So she jumps to his defense. So she's immediately a character that you can believe in and that you like. And like you said, DT, more importantly, you want to see more of.
More of them. Absolutely right. Nims, what do you think about the introduction of Layla?
Yeah, I really like this character. I think you guys have hit a lot on what I was going to say, although I'll highlight a few things that stood out for me. First of all, is the Mary Sue element. It's not here, and I really appreciate it. This is a strong female character, but like Jeff said, she has her flaws. She takes her lumps. I'm not saying that all women fight the same or have the same competence level, but she can be physically overpowered And I appreciate that because she's got to find a way to prevail anyway, and we're going to see that in later episodes, and we'll leave that for later episodes. But at the same time, she's very competent, and it's earned competence. It's obvious that she is someone who has been on these type of, for lack of a better term, she reminded me of Tomb Raider. She reminded me of Lara Croft, and here she is. And so that brings me to the next point I was going to make, which is, and DT kind of hit on this, but one of the things I love about this series so far has been the music. There's always this Egyptian undercurrent.
Oh, man, all that Egyptian rap at the end and the beginning is so cool, too.
And it's going to come forward in later episodes, and I'm sure we'll get to it. But then here comes Layla, and Layla has got this unique look to her. And you don't know it yet. I'm going to spoil a little bit. I don't think it's that big a spoiler. But you look at her, and you're like, I think she's got some different blood in her of some sort. She's not completely Anglo. There's some, there's some nice mix there. And she's got a very unique look. But at the same time, like DT was talking to, she's beautiful, but she's not a model. She looks like a normal woman who's beautiful. There's not like tons of makeup and everything on her. She's just doing her thing. Her hair is frizzy and frizzed out at times when she's been doing something or riding a bike. Her hair is not like immaculately coiffed and everything, She looks like a normal, beautiful woman with some exotic features to her, which we're going to find out a little about her more as the thing goes on. And it's like, that makes her much more believable as a character. All of this does, and makes me want to root for her.
Now, she's in a job where she gets scruffed up and dirty a lot. I mean, and you get to actually see that.
And Nim, doesn't that go right back to Marion? The actress is a beautiful woman, but she wasn't caked in makeup, and her hair was just whatever it happened to be in the scene because she's living that off-road action lifestyle.
And here's a maybe this is a newsflash to Hollywood, but kudos for you to doing this because all of us have either gone out, if you're heterosexual, you've either gone out with a woman or you're married to a woman or whatever who's not wearing makeup 24 hours a day. And you still find that person beautiful, and attractive and everything else. So there's that. And then on top of that, and then DT really hit on this, is that her reactions are spot on. You get the feeling without even having been told that she's been through the ringer with this guy. Mark has got problems. Even without being, switching between personalities all the time. The dude has got issues. And then suddenly she knows about the suit. She knows about Khonshu to a certain degree, one way or the other. She's had to deal with all this, excuse my language again, BS. And she loves the guy, but she's frustrated. And she's like, let's just do this. Let's get this over with. It's like, I don't want to deal with whatever it is you're doing now with the British accent and everything. Stop playing the games. You sent me the divorce papers. Let's do this. It's like, and so everything about her just talks about a woman who is like, I'm still in love with you, Mark, but it's like, I'm frustrated. All of this is like, if this is what we're going to do, let's get it over with. And then she finds the scarab and she's like, and now you're doing this behind my back. It's just, all of it is believable and builds not only her character, but Mark's character as well, and their past, and makes it something that you watch and you are fascinated by because it feels real. So kudos, applause.
Okay, now we're going to talk about this more in a minute. I want to throw it out here, but this is one of the few times where I can accept the I did it to protect you trope, because most of the time that just irritates me. Most of the time the hero's off doing what they're doing and they're purposely cutting out the female love interest, and then it just comes out later anyway, and the hero doesn't seem to realize that by you being who you are, you put everybody around you in danger. Okay, and that's a lesson that Spider-Man learns the hard way in the comics all the time. But especially on CW shows, or especially, classic Superman, or like Vicky Vale should have figured out Bruce was Batman. She did figure it out before Alfred brought her in the cave. When she wakes up and she sees him hanging upside down in the middle of the night like a bat from the jungle gym. But the point I'm trying to make is that there's a legit reason that Mark wants to keep Layla out of this mix. So we'll talk about it when the episode gets to it. But it's one of the few times where I accepted the I did it to protect you thing, and it didn't irritate me, didn't aggravate me, because it was real. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Now we're going to transition because we have to talk about this before we get to the actual point of the episode named Summon the Suit, because a lot happens with that too. I like the twists. Everything that happens from this point forward has a lot of twists. So what looks to be police or investigators or private detectives or somebody of authority are pounding on the door, let us in, badges, kick the door in, that kind of thing. And Stephen, of course, is freaking out because, what do we do now? And he reacts like somebody that got caught in, like with his girlfriend in the corner by his mom, or got caught, smoking a cigarette in the bathroom by the principal. He reacts like that. So, okay, so we get that. And, these are supposedly authority figures and, and you got to come with us. And, oh, look at all this money. And, oh, you got scared. And, oh, so you haven't been honest with us, Mr. Grant, blah, blah, blah. And so you think that the scene is going to play out like it would normally play out. But as it turns out, they're actually working for Harold. It's actually not any legitimate anything, but Arthur shows up. Now, I got a few things to say about Arthur's section in this episode. Most of it I like, but there's a few things that got on my nerves. What I like is that this villain that doesn't think he's a villain, he's an emissary, he's a zealot, he's an evangelist. He doesn't see himself as a villain. I like that. We talked about that last time. But his situation is being revealed in layers. I think that's a good writing move. Sometimes villains are one-dimensional because you see all there is to see of them when you first meet them. That's not the case here. But as we spend more time around Arthur, we learn more and more. So, big twist number one is that he used to be a Moon Knight. Arthur is one of Khonshu's former avatars, and now he hates him because of the way Khonshu treated him. I thought that's absolutely brilliant. I thought that's just such a rich addition, because there are no greater villains than people that used to be a part of the camp and they turn on you. I always love that writing technique. That's what I'm writing about in my Soldier, Serpents, and Sin series, about how Michael and Lucifer were buds. What happened? And then because when somebody turns on you, they know all the secrets. That's what makes them so dangerous. That's what I like about Arthur once he gets this reveal. And then he talks about how, Amit's justice, we can talk about this some more too, is basically Minority Report. We hit on it last time, but he visits it again here, that better to take people out before they do what they're going to do. And no, but he believes that. And it's such a brilliant example of writing a villain that has a flawed moral premise, that they think what they're doing is moral, and there might be some good to it, but what they're doing is so highly, egregiously immoral, and they can't see it. So once again, all of that I like. All of that's written well, and Ethan Hawke is a veteran actor, and I'm down with all that. The one thing I'm not down with is that I'm not sure about his powers. And that gets on my nerves when I'm dealing with any kind of situation where powers are in the mix. Because if that's the case, I need to know what you can and cannot do. Because most likely, you're going to contradict yourself later on when you show that, well, we could have always done that. Well, if you could always do that, why didn't you do that the first time? So after all this kind of stuff is going down, he hits the magic cane on the ground and calls up this lavender magenta energy and says some incantations and calls up another jackal. So on the one hand, that is consistent with the fact that we've seen jackals, but on the other hand, I'm like, is Harold Imhotep? That's why I keep bringing that up. Like, what exactly can you do? What exactly can you not do? Because based on what I'm seeing so far, you should have won already. Because every time you talk to somebody that you judge unworthy, you said, I wish you could live to see what we're going to do. Boop, they're gone. and you're calling up jackals and you're controlling all these people and you got people on the inside. So I'm starting to feel like you should have won already. I don't understand what the problem is. Okay. And because when that happens, you have to write the villains to be doing something stupid when you overpower them or their powers aren't clear. Okay. Because if you got all that going for you, you should have been, to the tomb, and you should have been able to accomplish what you're doing, because your protagonist is literally fighting himself. Your protagonist is not all there. So since you know what he's going through, and since you're the one that told him, it must be hard having all them voices in your head. And since you told him who Khonshu is and how he's going to treat you and what he's about and how you're glad you're not a part of that world anymore, you should have been done what you was trying to do from my point of view. That's the way he looks to me now. So it could just be me, but I'm like, all this other stuff starts to feel like a little bit like busy work to keep the villain preoccupied to prolong the storyline. Because if you can do all that, then I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I want to hear what you guys have to say. So that's the big twisty twist, that he used to be an avatar, Arthur, and that he's going to resurrect, and because he believes that Khonshu's justice comes too late. It comes after the fact. We talked a lot about this last time, and I definitely want to hear about it some more, because the question then becomes, is it right to stop someone from doing what they're going to do? Because it's a moral dilemma. In my point of view, it's a moral dilemma that mankind can't figure out. Because if you let them do what you know they're going to do, they are now guilty of the crimes, but there's a victim, there's injury, that the crime happened, and people are hurt because of it. And so if you make the moral argument that we can prevent all that, which is the pre-crime argument, and just not let them do what they were going to do, but then they are innocent because they didn't do it. So again, he says he believes in that justice. Okay. And so like we talked about last time, how far do you go with that? Do you go back in time and kill Hitler as a baby? Do you kill his mom? Will there still be another dictator even if you killed Hitler? That's the other thing. Are you actually preventing the evil, or are you preventing that person from doing the evil? Because there's no law that says that same spirit, attitude, and plan couldn't pop up in somebody else. So you take somebody else out and you think you prevented World War II. What if it comes around another way? See what I mean? So all that's wrapped up in Arthur. And again, so we got to talk about this little interlude where he gets a hold of him, because he starts to feel a little too all-powerful, a little too everywhere, a little too, has too many people working for him. And that just felt like Imhotep to me. And I'm like, well, dude, if you got all that going, then you should have, why are you even fooling with Mark and Steven? Okay, just go to the tomb and do what you're going to do, is what he started to feel like to me. So let me hear you guys about this little interlude with Arthur, where we discover all these twisty twists. Great reveals here. Nims.
Yeah, well, let me hit on the part that first I like about Arthur a lot, and which is this moral dilemma. I mean, and to put it in real world terms, it's really like a lot of the arguments we have now. Let's say free speech is a great example. It's like, there are two sides to that. Do you want to create the perfect world by being authoritarian and shutting down people, or in this case, being authoritarian and killing people preemptively? Or do you want to allow some bad things to happen and bad actors to say things or do things? In this case, it might be people committing crimes and stuff, and then punish them later on in order to stand up for whatever principle it is, free speech, free will, etc. So really, I mean, this is an endless philosophical debate, and I think this is the best part about Arthur, because they're really showing something very interesting. I mean, there really is a valid discussion here. Arthur could create that utopia, but is a utopia worth it if you've got to go through those authoritarian and draconian measures to do it and keep it? Because you're going to have to keep killing people. As new people are born, people are going to have to be eliminated. So you got to ask yourself that question. It's kind of what we talked about last week with some of the stuff that China does, or it's endemic to mankind, to humanity. This search for the perfect, but a lot of times you got to do some horrible things, and is it worth it? It's a very great discussion to have. It's great for a villain, to look at it, whether you just determine he's a villain or not. You look at that neighborhood, that seems pretty good, but is it worth what they've gone through to make it that way? That's a call you kind of got to make for yourself. And it's a great discussion to have. But then that gets us to Arthur himself. And I think Arthur, the character, is the flawed. And I agree with you, DT. And I'm going to go a little different way and look specifically at the cosmology they've created here. So you've got gods, Khonshu, and Khonshu, that's the one we've seen so far. And his avatar is Mark, his MoonKnight. And we find out that Arthur was this once as well. Well, now Arthur has the scales on him, and he's devoted to Amit. Well, we presume then that he's I think it's a safe presumption you can make that he's the avatar of Amit. Well, how is that possible? Because he's talking about resurrecting Amit. He's already mentioned that Amit is buried somewhere. So how does he have powers from Amit? Doesn't make sense. Not only that, he mentions that this staff that he's using, and I think, and this is where I'm starting to have to do some explanation for the show. I'm starting to have to fill in my own blanks. And we talk about that all the time. That's where you start to run into problems. It seems like he's using magic through a magical item that Amit created. Okay, that's fine. And that could explain that he has limitations on it, or it can only be used so many times and everything. But once again, now I'm doing the work of the show, trying to explain how his powers work and what the limitations are, and how he has powers from Amit to be able to do this, and how is he able to judge souls and cast them into the other world as Amit's avatar when Amit doesn't even exist right now but is imprisoned? And so that's the really weak part of this character. So even though I think the idea of the character is great and what they wanted to do with him, I think Arthur's, mechanics, the actual mechanics of the character, I agree with you, DT. I think that's a weak point of the show because I'm starting to have to do that explanation. And like I said before, whenever you start having to explain and make up reasons why it makes sense for yourself, then we're going down a bad road.
So the only explanation at this point I will accept, and again, you guys let me hear your thoughts, is that Arthur himself is just kind of got a revenge bent against Khonshu and anything having to do with him. And maybe that's why he's getting involved with Mark/Steven at all, because it's not efficient based on what he says his goal is. If his goal is to resurrect Amit, then dealing with the current MoonKnight would be going after him to try to stop that. But he keeps, getting involved, and he keeps, acting like the scarab is the only way, and it doesn't make any sense. Like you just said, if you're an avatar or if you have powers from this kind of thing, how could you possibly not know where the tomb is? So that's what I'm saying. It's just fuzzy. I'm not saying necessarily that's bad. I'm just saying it's not clear enough for me. Bracy, what do you think about this interlude with Arthur where he sends the fake cops and once again he's everywhere at once and he's all these people working for him and then he summons a jackal again?
All right. First things first. Flynn asked Clue to create the perfect system in Tron Legacy. And to answer that point, with Arthur's outlook on things, if you have to do horrible things, then you have not created a utopia. Utopia doesn't require horrible things. What was that story? Those who walk away from
Omelas. By Le Guin, yeah.
Yeah, tremendously great story about how even a seeming utopia is not a utopia, even if one person has to suffer horribly for it. I'm of the opinion that's a price too far. And my boy Steven, he made me like him a lot better because he brought up the very argument I had. It's like, well, if you're going to judge somebody, are you going to start killing children for something they do 30 years down the line? And what I say, you would have to judge children right out of the womb, if you're going to be efficient. And so that's how many dead babies you're going to have because they might do something. As long as you have the opportunity, there's always a chance for redemption, for hope, for salvation. As a Christian, this is one of our major tenets. You've gotten to your last breath. Although I would admonish all of you out there not to wait till then. Get right with Jesus now. But you can. I mean, I literally had a friend who came to Christ on his deathbed. And so, it's there. It's there. And what Amit is offering is horrific. There is no redemption. There is no salvation. There is no hope. It's almost puritanical. You're either destined for heaven or destined for hell, and that's how she looks at things. And that is going to be nothing short of a nightmare world. Even if all these people feel like they're the chosen, in the back of their minds, they're going to have some doubt when they watch a baby's life be snuffed out. I mean, the mother sure as hell isn't going to be happy with that. So you can't have a utopia. You can't have a perfect system. It's untenable, and it's unconscionable, and it shouldn't be allowed to exist, which is why we have Khonshu on the other side of this thing. Now, to address Arthur's powers, I think DTU and Nemesis have totally missed the mark here. Arthur Harrow is not all powerful. He is not an avatar. He is a representative. Now, he is allowed into the council, we will see in the next episode, where we have a council of gods convene. And this is something you'll see, not wanting to get too far ahead, but we see that each of the chosen avatars of each of the gods of Heliopolis here are indwelt by their god, and they literally, the gods speak through them. This does not happen with Arthur. We do not see this happen. And I know we don't have this foreknowledge yet here, but what I keep seeing is Arthur is working through props. He is not the avatar of his god yet. She needs to be unbound so that her influence can act outside of the world. He has to use this cane. And I think the tattoo, while it's her mark, I think it's just an indication of the power working, because it's always being worked through the cane. He's always touching somebody with the cane, or putting the cane in their hands, or he's touching things with the cane to enact the power. He himself is not the conduit of power as of yet. He's having to use a mechanical device that Amit has created, probably as a way for her to have some sort of influence in the world. Now, what does the cane allow him to do? It allows him to judge in Amit's stead, or judge through her. And it also allows him to summon things from the planar divide, if you will, from wherever the Egyptian gods reside. I believe it's Heliopolis in the Marvel comics, just as the Asgardians have Asgard. And he's able to bring things from that world into our plane of existence, although they exist in a different way than, the things from Asgard do, which are obviously much more tangible. We can see them, we can smell them, we can touch them, cameras pick them up, all that sort of thing. So again, it's a conduit to another source of power, another place. And his cult, I don't see it as being that widespread. I mean, it's impressive what he's got in an area, but it doesn't appear to be a truly global cult at this point. So, and we know, even though it's a bit of a MacGuffin, because, you got the Indiana Jones thing, you got to collect all the pieces, National Treasure, all those sorts of movies. You got to find the little things to find the treasure. And so, because the power's not through him, he's not an avatar. He has to work through mortal agents, and he has to work as a mortal himself. He still has to find the scarab in order to find Amit. And on top of that, even though he is the enemy and he used to be the ally, and he knows therefore how the ally works, just as Darth Vader was able to take down any remaining Jedi because he had been Anakin Skywalker. He knew how they worked backwards and forwards. He knew all the ways to defeat the Jedi, all the tactics they would use. Arthur's got this knowledge, but what he doesn't have, the edge that Stephen has, why he can't get over on Mark, is because Mark is a fractured psyche, something that he was not even prepared to deal with. He's got to deal with Mark, and he's got to deal with Stephen, and as we'll find out later, he's got to deal with other personalities. And this makes Mark / Stephen such a wild card. It makes him unpredictable. As he said, you have all this chaos in you. And as somebody who is encapsulating order to the nth degree, this is like, Batman trying to figure out the Joker. He can never quite go there. He can sort of figure out what he's going to do. He has to apply all his detective work to get there. But, if Batman knew the Joker inside and out in a really meaningful way, Joker would never be able to commit a crime because Batman would be there first. Oh, he's got out. Okay, yeah, he's going to go for this. He's absolutely going to go for this. This is how the Joker works. But that's the whole nature of chaos, is you can't predict chaos. You know, the symbol of chaos in the Eldrick of Mandabone books is an arrow that points out in all the cardinal compass directions. You'd never know which way chaos is going to go. It's completely unpredictable. So I totally buy into the fact that Arthur is having to struggle to achieve his goals. For me, this all works out, and it all works out logically. And I will say one last thing that I think is very fun. The fact that he keeps conjuring jackals is not just really cool because it's Egyptian, but in the comics, there's several times when Moon Knight was fighting the werewolf by night. And so it kind of reminds me of this a little way. Like we'll probably never get Moon Knight fighting werewolf by night, but we get the same fight, like 7 foot tall jackal monsters. So that was cool.
Okay, I follow what you're saying, but I still say it should be clearer in the context of the show.
I found it to be perfectly clear. I didn't feel like I had to do
because
the
you
work
are
on the show.
a walk-in Google search of tropes. That's how you know all that. Because you know all that. You're able to put all that together. I don't think it's clear enough in the show that he hasn't achieved avatar status yet, and he's not necessarily drawing. He's still searching. There should be some type of exposition, even if it's on the run, that explains that.
All right, I'll grant you that. Maybe I'm just too big a nerd.
The one thing I would add, especially just before we get to Steve, because I know he likes his books as well, is that Arthur seems to be, like you said, he's searching for that utopia. To me, he's very reminiscent of a series of books that I love, and one particular character, which is Dragonlance and the King Priest. You know, and this idea there, and I think that's kind of what they were going for here. I still think it's flawed, like DT, but I think they're going for this idea, where this flawed idea, and I love how they push it forward in Dragonlance. That in order for good to exist, you have to have evil. You can't have light, shadows, and they have to coexist. And so I love this kind of concept of thinking about it that way, because if one really tries to exterminate the other, it ends up being the destruction of both. So
there was a great line in the Swamp Thing annual when Alan Moore was still writing it. It was art by I think John Tolobene at the end, and they had to deal with the rising of the ultimate evil, and the idea was that it was going to go and destroy the creator. And all the champions who went against it, the evil kept asking them, what is evil? And they all had these definitions depending on what their personal biases and virtues were. And like he told the evil told the specters, like, oh, you have taught me to hate, little man, and he flings the specter away. And they each taught him the wrong lesson. So the Swamp Thing is the only one who doesn't go there by force, and he confronts the thing and he says, perhaps evil is the loam from which virtue must grow, because he thinks like a plant, because he is a plant. So it's like the evil is required to show you how bright the light is, how good the light is, how necessary the light is.
If the cane is an object of power for Arthur, and I was Amit trying to get resurrected, I would have built a map into the cane.
We can't have everything. I mean, otherwise there's no plot.
That's my point about inefficiency. But anyway, Steve, what do you think about this little interlude with Arthur?
Yeah, I think this is kind of where we really start to see at least his point of view come about a little bit more. I think we've already talked about the pre-crime stuff pretty thoroughly. I will talk about a few things, though, and that is one of the things that Hera really talks about is the eradication of the choice of evil.
The choice.
And this is kind of like, it kind of brings me back a little bit to Legend, where the idea is that, light cannot exist without shadow, shadow cannot exist without light. You need both of them. And, but that requires the ability to choose between them. Is something truly good if you are forced into it? If you, how can you truly call yourself a good person, if you are not working towards that, if you are not earning that, if you are inherently forced to be good because this is the only option that you are allowed. Okay. And so essentially, Harrow is trying to make good kind of like a banal choice,
Hmm.
or by eliminating the option of it at all. Is redemption possible if you can't choose it? And we begin to see that. And not only that, it's like, okay, we're going to, kill children, by how many? I mean, millions, billions, what kind of death toll is that going to take? And, and is the loss of those people, getting rid of good in the world? Are these people, capable of redeeming themselves, of changing, making different choices, of making better choices? Are they capable of inspiring others to make better choices? How many families are being destroyed by the loss of these children and these people that he's killing for his utopia? There are so many unforeseen consequences and unintended consequences that are potentially created by this ideology, that could end up being destructive, and for what, so we can have, what, and who determines what exact moral standard are we talking about? Because the very idea of morality does have a certain level of flexibility to it, depending on culture and whatnot. So we're dealing with this one goddess's idea of what good is and what evil is, and we are going to remove the choice of that. Would we be summarily dismissed because we don't meet these standards of Amit, because maybe we have different ideas of what morality is than in a thousands of year old Egyptian goddess? I mean, it just, there are just so many questions that I feel like you could think out this entire thing and just find problems with it. And in either case, the complete loss of the freedom to choose morality just undermines everything and just makes it worse. And on top of that, if we decide that you're immoral, we're just going to summarily kill you, and do not pass go, do not collect $200. Yeah, it is really kind of shows how frightening Harrow is as a character, how deeply dark he's willing to go, and how little he cares. And he likens it to amputation. Yeah, we're just gonna cut off all of these people, heads, just so the body can grow. And it's like, so you see everybody as a collective then. You're not seeing them as individual people and individual, lives that are lost. And I think this goes back to the idea of order, and and just seeing the whole at the expense of the individual. Really frightening stuff. And as far as the powers go, yeah, I'm kind of like, I think it did need to be made more clear, because we certainly don't see that Khonshu is capable, of doing these kinds of things. Why is he? All we see that he gives him is the suit and maybe certain level of strength, etc. We see Khonshu, playing around with the environment occasionally when he's having a tantrum, and whatnot. But we really don't see anything on the level of what Amit is able to do while behind bars. And so I'm like, my eyebrows are kind of raised on this. It does seem like there are certain conveniences granted because he's the villain. But to what extent? I mean, I think it's kind of interesting to see Jeff's point of view on this. I do think some of what he's saying may very well be possible. It could very well be likely, but is it explained sufficiently? Not to my liking. Hopefully we'll see that in upcoming episodes or in the conclusion. So we'll see about that. And then I think there was one other thing that was kind of on my mind that I was trying to say about Harrow. Oh, yeah. I'm wondering how much of Harrow's viewpoint and what he's doing is driven by his hatred of Khonshu rather than his love of what Amit represents. I get the feeling like he's torn between these two things.
He's a lover spurned.
Yeah, he's a lover spurned.
You think he's trying to convince himself?
Yeah, yeah, and I think he just feels like a certain sympathy for Mark in a way, because I think he really doesn't want to kill him. I think he's trying to convince him. Khonshu's going to do to you what he did to me. So you should get out of there. While you can. I don't want to have to kill you because I've been in your position. I find that really interesting. I mean, he's really trying to avoid doing that. He only does it like at the last resort because he has to get the scarab.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of intrigued by that, and I do feel like there is a certain level of anger that he still has towards Khonshu. I think there is a little bit of the spurned lover thing with him. You know, why did you forsake me? You know, those kinds of questions that he still has. And and I kind of wonder whether he's kind of like, okay, this is my new girlfriend now. You know, I'm going to show her what I never was able to show to you because you wouldn't, treat me the way I wanted to be treated.
Yeah, because we don't know how that relationship ended yet.
Yeah, we don't know that yet, and but I do find it interesting. It is very fascinating.
Now, I will say this, and this is just a theory, and since Jeff kind of brought his up, I was kind of thinking, and this would be absolutely monstrous on Arthur's part. What if he's not channeling any god powers at all, but he got spurned and he went looking for Egyptian magic and found this cane, and he's doing all this to impress Ahmet and wants to bring back Ahmet so he could be an avatar again. And then maybe that backfires on him because she wakes up and goes, "What?
Who are you?"
I'm beginning to think, like, how does being a former avatar affect you? You used to have all of this power. You had the voice of a god inside you. But suddenly that's gone, and you have to cope with with just being mortal. I'm wondering if he's trying to fill that void within himself, through his faith in Amit. With the hope of maybe being an avatar again once she's freed.
I mean, because look at his outlook when he talks about removing the center as amputation, and he's going to do it because he didn't have any problem with killing children. So imagine if you 15 years from now, I'm going to get cancer in this arm, and it's going to have to be amputated to save my life. But that's 15 years. I have good proactive use out of this arm. And so you're starting off a cripple with a society that he wants to create.
Yeah. Well, and
it's very much like the operative in the way he sort of looks at things.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You don't kill children. I do.
Talk about being monstrous, though. I mean, the thought that perhaps this is all just magic and he's channeling magic through this, artifact that Amit created, thinking that he's going to win the approval.
And he's perverted it.
Yeah. And then he wakes up the goddess and she's pissed. I mean, if we talk about a twist, that would be really something. So
that would be a very Joss Whedon thing to do. It's very Whedon-esque. So let me throw this stuff out, and then we're going to move to the situations about the title of the episode because they're quite complex. But I got a few things I got to throw out in response to everything you guys just said. First thing I want to throw out is this is what I like about the difference between Moon Knight and Batman. Up until Frank Miller, Batman was in control of the Bat motif and the Bat idea. That's all Bruce's idea, meant to scare those he's going after. Mark made a deal, and Steven and Layla and whatever got kind of caught up in that deal, and they're not necessarily in control of what's going on. They all kind of have their parts to play. Miller changed that when he introduced the idea of a Bat God avatar in The Dark Knight Returns. And that's how Bruce has his healing powers. That's how Bruce is able to heal from all those terrible injuries. And that's how Batman's able to last so long. So I thought that was really interesting, the contrast between the two until The Dark Knight Returns, because there's definitely healing that you get from Khonshu from the suit here. We'll get to that in a second. Other thing I wanted to say is I want to reiterate my point from before, because we see it. We see it with Palpatine. We see it with Vader. We see it in real life with zealots. We see it many times in religious extremes. People become convinced that we can establish this regime and this way of life and just eliminate everybody that doesn't agree with us. I stopped by to tell you, if you eliminate people, you're not going to eliminate evil. That's the part that they always miss.
Yeah, that's always the go-to, though. Eliminate these people. Everything will be fine.
And everything will be fine if we just take these people out. But you're not going to eliminate evil, and you're not going to be able to see the evil in yourself. Well-written stories always reflect that you didn't count on the snake in the garden. You didn't count on the snake in your midst because you kept saying snakes out there, but you didn't look in here. Even if you kill people before they do heinous things, it doesn't mean, like I said before, that those heinous things ain't going to manifest in somebody else.
It's why I don't want to get uber political, so I'm not going to name names, but it's why a certain economic/political system never works. Never works. So
kind of reminds me of this one Twilight Zone where this guy has kind of like the device to get rid of the most evil person around. And he's basically somebody who's always like accusing all these other people of
Oh,
doing
does it get
terrible
rid of
things.
him?
And so the device gets rid of him because he's the one doing all the evil.
All right.
That's right.
Love
That's right. That's always the missed element.
Or the obsolete man from Twilight Zone is another great example as well. Once you get rid of that obsolete man, you become the next obsolete man. So
that's
the
right.
line just got a little shorter.
and the more strict you draw that line, like there was an episode of Sliders where the Third Reich won. But if there's ever a situation where any regime does that, you have to keep such a tight lid on everything until life is not worth living, because everything would be monitored. You would have everything on TV, which you can argue it is now, but the propaganda, the information you would be fed, which is what happens in cults, tells you to ignore any type of outside voice because they're wrong, they're evil, and listen to that is going to send you to hell. So you just listen to what we tell you. That's always a common thread in any type of religious abuse or manipulation or addiction, is that every other voice is wrong except ours.
See, but I think this is great. I'll just say this real quick, and you guys can either, we can move on or what, but I think this is great on Disney's part and the MCU and the writers' part. I mean, I wasn't expecting this, but these are deep questions.
It's a shockingly mature show.
That I hope all the people out there watching are thinking about, because this is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with in real life now. It's like, and both sides, if you're on the extreme, you probably don't have the right answer. The answer is somewhere here in the middle, but it's like individual freedom, collective freedom, authoritarianism. All of these are really deep concepts that every adult should be thinking about, and that Disney, to their credit, has made some art that you can use to think about these type of things. Bravo, more of it, and
that kind of stuff is also, just as a tangent, Star Trek at its finest. That's what Star Trek used to do better than any other show that I'm aware of.
Twilight Zone too.
Twilight Zone as well.
Doctor Who.
Yeah. Twilight Zone as well. Take real life moral issues, put it in a sci-fi context, and now all of a sudden maybe it's less threatening, but it's not less real, because you're looking at what you're dealing with. So yes to all that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the namesake of the episode, and that is Summon the Suit. There's so much stuff that happens with this. First of all, for those of you that aren't familiar with the comics, this is where it begins to deviate a little bit. And if you are a hardcore comic purist, you don't like what comes next, because Shelby and Ellis, when they created the more sophisticated, more dapper version of Moon Knight, that character is a little bit more ice cold, a little bit more smooth, a little bit more everything that Steven is not. And so to have Steven summon that suit, and I'm pretty sure this is what Steve was talking about before, but this is also the kind of Disneyfying of the episode, because we get several minutes of comic relief, kind of bumbling, kind of, ooh, and I can't stand it. I'm like, this is not even necessary to what's going on here. You had a good vibe going. And then here comes Mr. Bumbler, which also leads me to talk about another trope that irritates me, and that is that I can't stand it when you have that one character that always makes the wrong decisions no matter the situation. Every time you put them in a situation, the call they make is the wrong one. So you're in a life or death situation and you need to surrender the body. Steve was like, no, I got it. If I was in the theater, I would have been screaming at the screen. I said, what is this? And then, and later's like, summon the suit. He's like, what suit? And so then conveniently, right before he's about to splat, he says, okay, suit. And then he gets that suit. That's not the Moon Knight character from the comics in that suit. And even Mark's like, what are we wearing? What are we doing? So if you're familiar with the comics or you're a comics purist, that probably made you angry because you don't get to see. Maybe he'll grow into it, but we just have one episode left and we don't know about how many more seasons, if there's going to be any more. Maybe he'll grow into that character. I don't know. But that's not the thing from the comics. It was pure comic relief. I see the invisible jackal, and Layla doesn't see it, but then Layla does see it because it grabs her. Then we have all this invisible wire work, so you're being attacked, and then it's out and open in the street, and They must be drunk and that kind of thing. And it was just supposed to be funny. And it just irritated me because we had such a good episode going. And then you have to do this. And then he, finds out he has super strength. And first of all, I call chicken scratch on that because you'd feel it. Doesn't Superman feel when he loses his powers? Doesn't he feel when he can no longer do what he can do? You feel it. Okay, so now all of a sudden you've got super strength, but you don't know you have super strength until you grab, a car bumper, and all of a sudden, yeah. So now all of a sudden you've got courage and you're taking the swing, and it felt like the Scarecrow from the Wizard of Oz to me. I was just like, yeah, really, if you only had a brain. So I was like, this is not necessary, and so. Finally, they keep using the mirror stuff, and Mark is like, "Would you please let me get us out of this?" And so after, okay, and so after that exchange, and after the swinging, and look at me, and yeah, you're in my playground now. I'm like, dude, you got him one lucky punch on an invisible creature, and he conveniently does the thing that villains do. They step back and they snarl and they get all villainous for melodramatic effect. It's very inefficient. Okay, he's invisible. He's an invisible jackal. He's got the advantage, but he steps back long enough, and you're seeing him, and you're squaring off, and you're talking trash, and blah, blah. I'm like, okay, what? So that whole thing just really irritated me. But then finally, we get to see Mark come out, and Mark summons the suit, the real Moon Knight suit. And even though we get the least amount of real Moon Knight in each episode, I still liked it when I saw it, and I still love seeing him in action. I love seeing his powers, what he can do, but mastery of those powers, knowing what's going on. And I love the crescent batarangs. The crescent, I love them. I love them. I can't get enough of those. And I love that Mark absolutely knew what to do. And as we mentioned before, that Layla knows about this and who that is. And Layla's like, do that, be that guy, that kind of thing, which also leads me to this point. And that is that we get the reason revealed that Mark is out with Layla. And that is that he knows that Khonshu is eyeing Layla as his replacement. And that feeds into what Steve says. Is that a completely non-selfish motive? Does Mark actually enjoy this? He keeps saying, as soon as I pay my debt, we're done with this. But is he? Does it really mean that? Because, you don't have superpowers anymore. You don't have the suit anymore. There has to be some kind of withdrawal, okay? Or are you purely trying to look out for your wife? And it's one of the few times where they did the I did it to protect you trope that I actually bought, because that would make sense. Because if you love her, you would not wish this life on her. And there's no guarantee she would survive as the Avatar. And so I can see why Mark would be like, I don't want you having any parts of this. And so while I have to pay my debt, I'm going to cut you out of this to keep Khonshu away from you.
Honestly, we don't even know that the Avatars survive other than Arthur, because as he tells him, like, there's always one more mission.
Right. But also, Steve hit it, are you a husk? Are you a dried up husk from being used?
Yeah.
From having this power? What does it do to your mortal body? That kind of thing. Oh, that's really fascinating. And so other than, misappropriating the dapper, cool Moon Knight suit and persona and perspective and turning it into pure comic relief, other than that, I really liked, finally, the whole summon the suit thing. And you got to see what Moon Knight could do. You got to see the super leaps. You got to see the crescent batarangs. You got to see the fighting style. You got to see a whole bunch of stuff that I really, really liked. And then you got that conversation with Khonshu at the end as the episode comes to a close. So, I mean, I really like that whole thing. So, in seeing Moon Knight and seeing more of him, the deepest thing about this show is that, now I have to try to word this carefully if I can convey what it is I'm trying to say. Bruce Wayne is Batman, and Batman is Bruce Wayne, and Batman is something Bruce Wayne created for his vendetta to fight crime. But Moon Knight is our avatar. So he happens to be Mark Spector in the moment. But Moon Knight is a thing that's not Mark, even though Mark is Moon Knight. You follow what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I find that extremely fascinating. Extremely fascinating that when you spring into action, it's only because of what Khonshu is doing through the suit, and that's not really you, and you can lose it at any time. And one of your enemies is somebody that used to do what you're doing. That kind of thing is what Steve said. What would that do to you psychologically? That kind of thing, because Tony Stark is Iron Man because he invented the tech. So when he said, I am Iron Man, that's the truth. That's you in the suit because you built that suit. But what do you do when your power, and it's a little reminiscent of Billy Batson and me, what happens when your power comes from an external source and other people have that power and maybe you could lose that power, or it's not really you. See, Superman is who he is because of one thing, biology. So that's really you. You have to be Kryptonian to have that effect under a yellow sun. So that's really you. But this Moon Knight is a thing apart. And again, I just find that layer so fascinating because Bruce Wayne is in control of the Batman thing, and he invented the Batman thing, but Mark Spector did not invent Moon Knight. So I won't say he's victim is too strong of a word. He's not a victim,
Pawn.
but he's a grudging participant along for the ride. And that's not the same as being a superhero.
Read the Kane Chronicles. Read them.
He's a pawn.
Khonshu's in the Kane Chronicles too. That's all I'll say.
Nice.
Read them. So
I want to hear you guys' thoughts about all that. I know I threw out a lot, but what else is new? So I want to hear your thoughts about all that, about the dapper Moon Knight suit and how that deviates from the comics and the real Moon Knight suit, but also what type of existence is that where your powers are external from you, and it's not a suit that you built. It's an endowment by a crazy guy that you might lose because he said, you mess with me, I'm gonna get your wife. I'm gonna make your wife be Moon Knight. Holy cow. Okay, what do you think about all that, Steve?
Okay, I've been wanting to talk about this for a while because you covered quite a few of these things that I was going to get into. Yeah, the Dapper Moon Knight thing. I will say in its favor that they made the suit look great. This is how I would expect the suit to look. They made it look wonderful. The problem is that they made him Stephen Grant, and I hate that. I hate it so much. Now the Mr. Knight persona in the comics. He kind of starts off being kind of like Mark, and then it kind of evolves where he's a different personality, even from Moon Knight to a certain extent. Because this is a incarnation of Mark that is emphasizes his detective skills, and he's also a bit more of a pugilist, and he's also that smooth operator guy that we see. There is a whole episode in the Ellis run where he's just going at all of these thugs trying to go up a building, in order to save this person that he's trying to save, and it's badass. I mean, you see him using all of these elements that Mr. Knight is there. They are nowhere in this episode because they gave the wrong person the suit. They gave the wrong persona the suit. It should have been Mark. It should have been Mark being able to do that. If they wanted to give Stephen Grant his own, incarnation of the suit, they should have created something else. I don't know why they did that, because he just makes it look like a joke. And this whole business of, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, my name's Stephen with a V. As a Stephen with a V, this annoyed the hell out of me. I didn't like it. It wasn't funny. It was cringe. It was horrible to watch. I mean, I will give Oscar Isaac all the credit in the world for trying to make this work, but oh my God, is it bad? And I will say, what ends up saving it is the fact that he eventually does become Moon Knight, and that's awesome. I really absolutely love him as Mark. I mean, because when he's Mark, he's that more serious character. He's not being used for Disney level yucks. And he gets down to business, and he acts like a professional, and he beats the hell out of these things. You love seeing him float through the air with the cape extended, and the way the cape looks like a crescent moon. I mean, those kinds of motifs, him flying off of rooftops. I mean, this is what you want to see as a Moon Knight fan. I mean, all that stuff is great. Now, I will say in credit that I can understand to a certain extent why Stephen Grant doesn't want to give the body up. Because this is somebody who values life, and he is worried that at the minute that he sees the body over to Mark, that he's going to go and murder people, which he will do. That is a totally rational viewpoint. At the same time, you kind of need him at this moment. You really need him to beat these guys who are trying to kill you and trying to kill Layla. If you care about surviving and you care about Layla not being killed by jackals and by, Harrow's goons, yeah, you let Mark handle the situation and just let the dominoes fall where they will. Because, Mark's going to kill people, but at least, but what he does for you is worth it. And I just feel like Steven waits too long to give up the body. I mean, I just feel like he should have done it on the top of the building, like not when he's falling several stories, after falling several stories, to become Mr. Knight. That just did not work to me. I think that he should have been Moon Knight a lot sooner than that. But once we finally get there,
going to work either, because he did it.
We don't know that he's going to do that. And I will say, I did kind of like Khonshu finally, getting irritated with him, and he said, "Turn on this suit," and then the suit finally goes on. But once you start getting to Mark, and when you just start getting him, to what he is in the comics, and he starts, actually kind of looking a lot like the Hurwitz, David Finch Moon Knight. You get to see the crescents, in the fingers. I like the way that he holds the crescent boomerangs in his fingers and he throws them. They look like claws. I mean, all of these sort of elements that looks like a lot of the traditional Moon Knight that you see in the comics is very, very well done. But when they try to deviate things, when they try to make Stephen Grant more of a character than he should be, especially this version, who can be very, very irritating and very useless, and he does make the wrong decisions the vast majority of the time. He's like Tom Holland in No Way Home. He just continues to make bad decision after bad decision. But the saving grace is Mark, because he is not that guy. He usually will make the right decisions. He'll make the bloody decision. He will leave a lot of bodies in his wake, but that's who he is. And that's what you're there to see. You want to see him deliver out the vengeance of Khonshu, and he does it. And once you finally get there, that forgives a lot of the earlier nonsense you have to sit through. The last 15 to 20 minutes, I think, are made quite good just by seeing that. And that is what you want to see.
Now, we talked about it before, but we need to acknowledge it, and I'm going to throw it to Nims, and it's in the avatar behind you and the one behind me, that the look of the Moon Knight suit is not cloth or leather or spandex, but this particular look is Egyptian mummified bandages. So it's more of a mummy with a hoodie and the shield. And so when the suit comes and it wraps, you can see the detail of the bandage work, and you can see it even in still shots. And I think that's such an incredible touch that it doesn't look like a costume. It doesn't look like something you could carry in a duffel bag. It doesn't look like something that Oliver Queen or Bruce Wayne or Dick Grayson could put on, but rather it's an enchanted, it's a suit, it's something that's otherworldly, and you're almost, and
it's like Spawn's costume.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it reminds me of Spawn. So,
and that's what I mean about it visually, psychologically conveys to you that what's in there is not necessarily about Mark. That's what I mean. Visually, even though, you might not think about it, that thing can exist separate from Mark, and Arthur proves that it can, and then maybe future Layla proves that it can. And so it's a thing apart from the actual hero in person. It's just something they're wearing, and then it becomes something else when it's on him. I really, really like that. Okay, Nims, everything that happens at the end of the episode, lots of stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit different direction. Let me start off with Mr. Knight. I thought the look, like I agree with Steve, the look was great. And as far as it being Stephen Grant, Yeah, on some level it bothered me, but I've come to expect it, and everything else I enjoyed so much I kind of forgave it, especially with, and I think this is a valid point, I think it was redeemed by the contrast against the epic utter badassness of Moon Knight at the end, and then him doing the you know, Macho Man from the top of the building, you know, Randy Savage coming down with the jackal creature onto the spike. I mean, it was just like I was ready for the bell to ring, ding, 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 and your winner is in Moon Knight. So that was absolutely epic. That was superhero comic book action straight out of the pages of a comic book. It was absolutely fantastic. It was just spike the ball, and then Mark Spector's reaction when he realized he's done all this and he's lost the scarab. Perfect, absolute perfection. So kind of the thing I want to talk about, because I think Steve hit a lot of the points really well, is something that I think is Khonshu got Jeff. A thing that is kind of played down, but I thought was interesting, and DT kind of hit on it with the punch, Mr. Knight's punch, Stephen Grant's punch. Earlier in the episode, Stephen is talking about how, why do I need you? It's my body. It's the body. I could do all the things you could do. And Mark is like, I don't think it works that way. Well, you know what? I think Stephen is right. It does work that way, but it's only on an unconscious level. And it's that muscle memory. It's that, when he's just reacting, he's able to throw that punch. He's able to do those things. But when he consciously tries to do it, he sucks, And I think that really ties into this idea where the body does know how to do these actions. The body has muscle memory. And when the buffoon or the guy who's not experienced in fighting Mark Spector reacts off the cuff, he's able to throw a competent punch and take the thing out. But when he tries to replicate it and think about it, he can't do it. And so I think that's so interesting, the duality of these characters, that this body that he inhabits has the muscle memory to carry off a lot of these actions. I think that's just really cool. It's a cool little added Easter egg feature underneath. And I hope they play with that more. That's all I'm going to say. I think that's just such a cool concept.
Yeah, well, I still don't want to see the Scarecrow fight the flying monkeys. But anyway, that's just me. Okay, Jeff, what do you think about all the ending stuff with the episode? Dapper Mr. Knight, real Moon Knight showing up, that whole nine.
Yeah, so I like Mr. Moon Knight. I like Mr. Knight's costume. I always thought it was kind of a neat take on the character, although I hoped it was not going to be a permanent thing in the comics, because I love OG Moon Knight's costume. It's a look I do appreciate seeing from time to time, though, so it was really fun to see it happen here. I did like the part where they had to put in the superhero landing, but then he flubs it at the end because, turns out it's Steven. And I'll even forgive the fact that he didn't realize he had superhuman strength, because he just fell off a building. He's trying to process. And I'll agree with Nim. In the context of the show, it's not surprising to see that they gave Steven his own Moon Knight identity with Mr. Knight. And as nice as it is to see the costume, I'd like to see Mr. Knight be Mr. Knight, but we're not going to get that, and that's just not going to happen here. The disappointing thing is again, because they're doing this, it turns into comic relief, and Disney Marvel has this really horrible habit of taking dramatic scenes and downplaying them with inappropriate humor. It makes me think of the original Star Wars trilogy, which had very good situational comedy. And then when Lucas did everything himself with the prequels, with nobody else helping him with the writing, really, the humor became slapsticky in a way that wasn't funny, with a bunch of lame duck jokes and things like that. And we see this time and time again with Marvel. Surtur destroys Asgard. Thor's watching as his ancestral home, the place that he's the king of, that he's supposed to protect and defend, is destroyed. And then that moment is ruined by Korg in the corner saying, like, oh, I think I just killed Meek. No, he's fine. Doctor Strange whips on the cloak of levitation, fully becoming the Sorcerer Supreme. And then the cloak starts wiping his face like a, mother, you've got a smudge on you. It's like ruining moments. Disney seems to be invested in ruining moments of high drama with needless comedy. And I feel like that's what's going on again here. We get enough yucks out of Steven as he is. We don't need superhero yucks out of slapstick Steven. And we'll see it again in the next episode. He pops into Mr. Knight, and much like this, he gets totally owned. He's like, okay, Mark, take over. Save me from myself, because that's what we've got to do here. There is the fact that it's a nice contrast. I mean, I do like seeing the character stand up for himself. I did like him getting the one lucky shot, even if it backfired on him horribly in the next half a second. I do like seeing the character advance, but I just didn't feel personally. Maybe if I never read the MoonKnight comics, I'd have been okay with this. But it just doesn't feel like the way to go. It does make OG Moon Knight seem so much more badass when you see him in action. It does make you feel grateful for that. But I just wish that Disney Marvel didn't feel the need to go there. I understand you're a family brand and all that, but you're doing something really different with this show. This show isn't Deadpool levels of adult, but you're getting into some really interesting territory. And like Nemesis, I applaud it. Don't screw it up with dumb humor, please don't. It's not even clever. It's not as clever as Groucho Marx. It's not as clever as Abbott and Costello. It's not even as clever as the Three Stooges. So if you can't actually be clever or funny about it, just don't do it.
Well, I think our souls have been tainted and biased by seeing so much of the same tropes over the years. So now when we see the scrawny guy getting a lucky punch in, it's just eye rolling. It's just another level of cringe. We're like, yeah, okay, dude, whatever. So as this episode winds up, they have to realize they have lost the scarab. And again, even if everything Bracey said was true, again, it just feels like unnecessary busy work for the villain that you have all this other information except where the tomb is, but now you need the magic scarab to get there. Because my immediate question is, what would you do if you didn't have that? Did you think about that before you started judging people and all with the scales and I wish you could live and sucking life out of them? What's the plan B in case you never got the scarab? Because you could have gone straight to that. You understand why I keep talking about efficiency? If you had a backup plan, if you didn't get your hands on the scarab, you could have been doing that all the time and Ahmed could have been back. But anyway.
But he's a true believer. There is no plan B.
Okay. So anyway, so overall, in conclusion, really, really liked this episode. This was normally this is the make or break episode in a series. Because that first episode has to lay the groundwork, introduce a lot of mythology, introduce at least, the main players and kind of invite you into the world. But it normally doesn't have enough time to completely tell you what the world is about, although sometimes it does. But it's got to get the story going as well as help you understand what kind of world you're living in. It's the second episode that sets the tone to let you know pretty much how is this going to go. And in that regard, I felt like this episode absolutely did its job. I want to see more of Mark and Layla. I want to see what happens if and when they get to the tomb. I want more of an explanation as to what Arthur is really doing or who he really is, because there has to be more layers there because we keep seeing him in layers. Now that we know what's going on with Khonshu and the kind of deity that he is, want to see what's happening there. And one of the biggest pluses or one of the biggest positives for me is that so far there aren't any extraneous characters, as opposed to, like, let's say the Flash. You've got 12 actors, so you got to write a story for each one of them to go off. You got Joe and Cecile, and you got his kids, and then you got Iris and her group, and then you got Caitlin and Frost and all this. And In this, so far, there aren't any extraneous actors or characters. It doesn't feel like anybody's just in there to be there. The people that are in there for a scene get that small amount of screen time, but we keep following the main characters and what's going on with them. And I love that because it kept my interest from start to finish. And so when Khonshu, tells Mark, where do you think we're going? They're going to Egypt and that kind of thing. And you guys talked about it last time about the weaving of not just the mythology, but the feel of Egypt and how that's such an integral, central part of this character and of this lore and how it's just right there. I think that's great. Now, I've seen some complaints on Twitter because, people go to Twitter to complain, but they were talking about, Mark's actual ethnicity or being Jewish and Egyptian, which is quite like Moses, if you think about it. But they were talking about some stuff about, getting an actor to exactly match that. And I'm like, I'm so over that kind of stuff. So, but I just love, where it's going. And I want to see what happens next. And that's the main thing. When the episode ends, you feel like that's it. And you can't wait to see the next one. What happens next in the story? So I give this one high marks. So really enjoyed it. Like I said, really want to continue with it. The only other thing because it's only 6 episodes, so they're actually about to release the finale this week. So my concern I had with the first season of The Flash, and that is that, are you burning story too fast? The good news is that there's more source material in the comics, but the rough news is they've introduced so much here already, and there's so much more to be introduced, are you burning through story too fast? Because what happens when this one is over? Is it going to revert to an Indiana Jones style thing, which wouldn't be bad, but are you going to chase artifacts and MacGuffins all over the world? Is it going to be more of a Mission Impossible thing? Like, where can the story go after this arc is done is kind of what's kind of tickling my brain right now, because I don't want them to burn through so much story until they don't have anywhere to go if the series comes back. Because many times when that happens, that second series it just tanks.
There's one thing I wanted to add to over the overall feel for this episode is that even though Steven could be a buffoon and Steven could be Disney-esque or whatever, I'm also starting to get the feel of this episode. I'm feeling bad for him. I'm starting to look at him. He's the third wheel in his own body.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what's going on. It's really sad and horrifying. And you're like, where is this all going to go for the persona of Stephen Grant? And it really does engender sympathy and sadness for this. So
it makes you wonder when Mark tells him, like, let me finish this debt to Khonshu and you'll never have to see me again. Does that mean that Stephen disappears forever or Mark disappears forever?
Yeah.
I think that has a lot to do with Layla. Like, wherever they are in that relationship, when this comes to an end, Mark's goal is to protect Layla from connecting with Khonshu and becoming the next Avatar. If they could pull that off, there's no reason Mark and Layla wouldn't get back together, which means Steve won't have to disappear unless she's in love with him. So,
yeah, just that whole concept, though, is just a love triangle with a guy in your own body, and you're the third wheel, and you find out you have a wife, and it's just, man, talk about something that would really drive you insane if you weren't insane already. So,
well, it's like you said, it depends on Layla, because I can see Mark letting Steven take over the life because of all the guilt he has from his past. But if Layla still wants Mark, then Steven's going away.
Yeah.
Well, Steven is definitely one that's on this roller coaster, and it's not his fault. It's nothing he asked for and nothing he expected. So he's definitely the what in the world is going on here character. Steve, some more final thoughts?
Yeah, I think all of the things you've raised are interesting, but I'm also like wondering about like other characters that I would like to see. I would like to see Frenchie show up. There are plenty of villains after the series that they haven't even really touched on. They haven't touched on Bushman. They haven't touched on Black Spectre, Stained Glass Scarlet, Morpheus. and a lot of the really typical Moon Knight villains we really haven't seen yet. There's elements of Egyptian mythology that could still be interesting. We really haven't seen any sign of Seth, for example. And there could be very well be other avatars that I would like to see more of the avatars in general, because I think that just basically opening the idea up the way that they have on the show sets it apart from the comics in a way that's interesting and adds depth. And I feel like there's a lot more that can be said on that. I would like to see occasional episodes of Moon Knight just having him, deal with being the guardian of travelers by night, and just doing a lot of those, smaller urban sort of adventures that you see in like the Ellis run or the Mensch run, things of that nature. I think there's a lot of possibilities depending on what they want to do with it. And I definitely want to see more of Mark and Layla, because those two are great together.
I think
I mean about a shift in tone. That's what I mean. Because I'm not saying any of that would be wrong, but I'm saying the entire tone of the series would shift if we go to detective, hardcore kind of street stories. You know what I mean? Which isn't bad. I'm just saying it's just different from.
Yeah, I mean, like having different tones for different seasons. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think there's the potential to put them on the radar of other characters and introduce them in movies or TVs, with other TV shows, or have other characters from the other shows come in with this concept of Khonshu, and you've got cosmic level characters. I mean, think about a interaction between Wong, I'm not going to go Doctor Strange right away, but Wong and him, and having to deal with the fact that not only do you have magic over here and whatever you think you're doing, but there's Egyptian gods in the world, and they're doing this stuff. It's like,
because Thor: Love and Thunder is going to introduce the Olympian pantheon.
Yeah.
So we've seen that in the trailer that Zeus makes an appearance at the very least. So they're probably on Mount Olympus.
Yeah.
So Marvel is definitely getting cosmic.
All I ask.
So I mean, so there is good stuff you could do. This could also go sideways really fast.
Right. It really could. Okay. Any other thoughts you want to throw out before we wrap up?
I'm good.
Yeah. Same here.
I'm good. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode. We really love when we get to review stuff that we really like. That's just infinitely better, which is why I'm glad we're not watching certain other series which shall remain nameless, but you will hear me rant about them on Twitter all the time. But this is great. So I'd like to thank my co-host. Thank you so much, Nims.
No problem. This is great. I'm really enjoying this.
Thank you so much, Bracy.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be here. And hey, DT, would you like to pick a card?
Well, I like to pick a card. Maybe.
As long as it's not a Star Trek themed yet.
Oh Lord. Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, this has really been a pretty good show. I mean, for all of our little criticisms about, the Disney humor and Stephen Grant's portrayal and little things like that, they give you just enough to make you really get invested in the show and these characters, and that's really what you want to see in a show like this.
And I just want to let you all know that next week I won't be here. Girardi will be taking my place.
Oh,
no.
A better, kinder,
she who shall not be named,
gentler board. No, only
we'll go back in time and erase her from existence.
Who want to be assimilated. And we can make the galaxy better. And the board queen says, okay, don't get me started. Okay, so on that note, we're going to wrap this up. And
I'm not getting assimilated by the boyfriend killer.
Don't forget to check out our other offerings on United Capes Podcast Network. And don't forget to check out our other YouTube channels on Comic Crusaders, because we have a lot of different things to offer. We literally have something for everybody. So if you're in geek world at all, you can find some content that you'll enjoy.
Yeah, it's Cinema Crusaders this Friday. Life of Brian. We're talking about it. So
Life O'Brien. And me and this crew will see you next time to review episode 3 of Moon Knight. Next time on Sloppy Spoilers.